Well, hello, and welcome to the appendicular skeleton. We are in Bio 211 at Norwalk Community College, and what I'd like to do is prepare you for lab by introducing the appendicular skeletal structures that we want to be aware of before we actually get in the doors of the lab itself. Okay, so the appendicular skeleton, of course, is if here is ball on stick. Right, ball, stick. Now this represents the axial skeleton. Let's put some ribs on you. Okay. What we did in the previous piece of notes, okay, is we looked at the bones of the skull and the face. We looked at the bones of the vertebra. We looked at the bones of the actual ribs themselves. And we also looked at the anterior structure that makes up the thorax, right? What we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at, let's change out the color here. Make it, I don't know, what color should we make this? Let's make it, green. I don't know if that's going to show up so well, but we're going to actually now think about those structures that are appended to, right? So here are your hips, okay, and here are the bones of your legs, two down here, and then your feet, right? Put another one right there. Notice it took me about 2 seconds to draw this. Put your feet there. There's another foot there. I'm going to put the two bones down here of your radius and your ulna. Now I know this looks kind of weird, but it's a pretty easy way to remember it. And notice I'm not focusing on details here. I'm just trying to give you the general overlay of what you're looking at and what we'll be talking about. Okay? So let's get rid of that. Let's go over here. Go to the next one. And the appendicular structure is the function is for movement, of course. And these are essentially what we're doing is we're building girdles. That's what we're doing is we're literally building girdles, and those girdles will actually help with the ratio of how the body actually moves. And what I mean by ratio is like how we actually get symmetrical movement bilaterally. Okay, big fancy way to put it. Let's take a look here at the pectoral shoulder. Inside your lab notes, they tell you that later that the knee is the most complex joint structure in the body, and that's patently false. Your shoulders are definitely much more complex than your knee is. And here's what we're doing is we're taking a look at this bone that's called the clavicle, and inside your lab notes on page 11, I'm looking at the clavicle, and here it is, your collarbone right there. And I need you to see that it articulates with the sternum, and it articulates with the scapula, which is posterior to your body. And these two together are going to make a girdle that holds now the humerus of your arm in place. So we'll think about what it means to actually make that. You actually have humerus, ulna, radius, carpal bones that make up the wrist, and I don't really care about the metacarpals and phalanges. It's not that you shouldn't know them. We're not going to test you on them. In fact, the matter is usually I have people memorize the carpal bones or the bones of the ankles, the tarsal bones, right? But right now, I just want to make sure you guys can identify a humerus, an ulna, and a radius when we actually get into lab. So what does that clavicle look like? Here it is right here. You notice it has a sort of S-like shape to it, and it's very confusing. I mean, if I put this thing inside of a box, which I will not do, right? If I put this inside of a box, feeling it, it could be a rib, it could be all sorts of things. But notice its thickness, notice where it occupies space, and what it's doing is helping create a triangle inside your body so you can have points of attachment to move your arms. Here's the scapula, which is on the posterior aspect of your body. Here's the inferior angle, okay, and here's the superior angle. And you actually have musculature that sits both inside here and on the back of this. And this is the acromion as well as the corcoid process. And inside that glenoid cavity will be, I drew it in here, this would be the head. Notice I'm sticking with the green, so the whole theme makes sense, right? The head of the humerus that would fit inside that slot right there. Okay, cool. Let's get rid of that. Let's keep going. No, let's go. So if there's your joint, your humerus and glenohumeral joint, here's the humerus right here, and I know this is the anterior view. Here's going to be the joint now between the radius, your thumb radiates outward in correct anatomical position, and your ulna. And in between it, you actually have a piece of interosseous tissue that actually holds these two together. That's why they don't move apart when you literally twist your wrists. The bones of your wrist are called the carpals, the palm of your hand is metacarpals, and your fingers are made up of your phalanges. Okay, look at that. We've now done bilateral development of both arms, right and left, for the radius, the ulna, the carpals, as well as the humerus. If we take a look at the lower limbs, which is what I want us to do, okay, what I want you to see here is you're going to take a look at how first we're going to build, hopefully, a pelvic girdle. And the pelvic girdle is a little more complex than it sounds like it is, and I'll just show you. Each coax, or coaxial sets of bones, let's go like that, consists of 3 bones. So you actually have the ilium, the pubis, and the ischium, and the 2 coaxial bones are joined anteriorly by fibrocartilage again. Okay, so let's go like that. Okay, and what's going to happen is you're going to form some sacroiliac joints in the back, fibrocartilage in the front, and this is what actually holds your entire hip structure together. You can see this here. Here, okay, is the pubic symphysis, and that's fibrocartilage there. And there's the sacroiliac joint. This means this is the auricular surface. If this is the sacrum, holding these bones in place. And you notice in this cartoon, it doesn't actually show you the names of the different types of bones. We have to go over here. The largest bone is the ilium, the one you sit on, literally. If you're sitting on your sits bones, it's the ischium, and the bones that holds the front of your pubis together. Take your fingers and push into these. This is the pubic bone right here. So in total, to put a hip together, you have to have 3 on one side, 3 on the other side, as well as the sacrum behind it. So that's fused 5 bones, bare minimum. So 3 and 3, which is 6, plus 5 are 11 bones to actually make up the hip and pelvic girdle itself. So in your textbook, and not so much inside lab, is this discussion of what is true and more for lab and not for lecture. So what is a true pelvis and what is a false pelvis? And the true pelvis is everything that goes from, you'll see here's the actual end. So if here is the sacral bone right there. Here is the pubic bone, this structure right inside. Here is the line making this the true pelvis right there. So it's all the organs that sit inside that space, the colon, reproductive structures, and things like that. Okay? Everything up here, false pelvis, is holding, everything else inside your cavity. Males and females, they are actually different, and you should pay attention to this. Not that we're going to test you on it, like what is this, a male pelvis or a female pelvis. It should just make more sense that the female pelvis should allow for the skull of a fetus that is not closed yet to be able to pass through the brim inlet point here, whereas for males it's not required. Okay? The false pelvis is actually greater, meaning the space here is called the greater portion, but you're going to notice that it actually is less than 90 degrees. Okay? Because here's the pubic arch, less than 90 degrees. Here's greater than 90 degrees. And you actually have a smaller and heart-shaped pelvic brim. Okay? We don't care about that, but let's take a look now at the lower limbs. It's because this is acetabulum. It's the formation of those 3 bones that are fused together. And notice our femur attaches to it. We have put together a patella, which is that sesamoid bone I spoke about back in the appendicular recordings, it's the first part of your lab. And then you actually have the tibia. And you'll notice the fibula does not articulate with the actual femur itself. Don't make that mistake. Okay? And then you have the bones of the tarsals. Okay? The tarsals that make up your ankles. Metatarsals, the mid part of your foot, and then the toes themselves, which are the phalanges. Now again, I've just done the same thing. If this is the lower limb on one side of the body, the lower limb on the opposite side of the body should be bilaterally identical. Okay, there's always some space or, change between them, but they should be generally the same. If we take a look at what's holding the lower limbs together, there are 2 bones. Notice there's that interosseous membrane we just saw, okay, that is similar to what we saw with the radius and the ulna. So Mother Nature's figured out a way to actually create the ability to hold these together. And if you've ever noticed when you really twist your ankle and you sort of roll it the wrong way, it really hurts inside here. That's because you've stretched that interosseous membrane inside that space. And that's going to be pretty much it. I'm going to show you the bones of the foot right here. I want you to take a look at the tarsal bones. Here's the talus. Here's the navicular. Here's the third, all the way over here, cuneiform, right? Which means that's the second, which means that's the first. And that means over here is the cuboid, and there's the tarsal bone back there. And this is what actually, because here's the calcaneus. This is your heel, right? Okay. This is what makes up your foot. And if we literally, what happens, of course, is your body weight is now going to be suspended over the surface of this. And you'll see why that's significant in a minute. This is your arches of your feet. And this is what allows you to actually propel force into that big toe so you can push through your leg. And we'll worry about that later when it comes to ambulation. But you know fine well that if I cut back here, you can't propel yourself forward. If I cut over here, you can't propel yourself forward either. Okay? And that's it for the appendicular skeleton. So again, take a look at what's inside your lab packet. Notice what I've done is I've gone through all of the bones that are on page 11 as well as page 13. Okay. And what I want to do now is move on to what articulations are. And those articulations will be inside the next presentation. Okay. How do bones articulate and how do we characterize it? Paying attention specifically to the knee. Okay. So again, take a look at these things when you come into lab. It'll make things a lot easier for you.